There we go. Hi,
Cool.
everyone. We're very happy to be live with Ed James. Do you want to start us off with an intro to you and your books?
Yeah, so I am Ed James. I grew up near Dundee, but I live in the Scottish Borders now. I've been publishing books for almost 13 years now, which seems like a lifetime. Um, I started off writing the Scott Cullen books, which are now rebranded Police Scotland. There's 14 of those books. I published the D.I. Simon Fenchurch books set in London, Vicky Dodd's books set in Dundee, and most recently the Rob Marshall books, which are set in the Scottish Borders where I live now. Um, yeah, I've been published by publishers, I've been published by digital publishers, and I now mostly self-publish. So I'm one of those indie authors you hear a lot about. I'm master of my own destiny, and everything is my fault.
Having had the range of experience, do you have a preference?
Um, I think the best thing about being an indie author is you've got control, and I think that's what I've learned through various experiences, that's my one of my most important things is like maintaining control over the books. So I feel like if you sign a publishing deal with the publisher, you've got to have this sort of trust that they'll do at least as good a job as you can yourself. And nowadays, particularly in the indie space, there's so much, you know, so many techniques and tools and so on that you can use, which wasn't there when I started. I think that's my preference now is just maintaining that control. The downside of it is that, like I said, everything is my fault. So if a book doesn't do very well, it's down to me. What it's good to be able to take credit for successes, but also you've got to kind of take those failures on the chin and know that it's down to what you've done, or it could be the market, the timing, or whatever. But there's nobody else to blame but me. But that's the sort of cost of it, and I do really appreciate that. And also, there's nobody telling me not to publish certain books or as many books as I do, which is a good thing. So I can just write to my schedule, my frequency, and edit the book how I want rather than to a set formula or whatever. That's not to say I wouldn't want to be published traditionally, because they have a different thing. So the thing with being an indie author is that I've got books in the Kindle, I've got books in audio now mostly, but getting books into bookshops is really difficult. I've got lucky that I've got a lot of local bookshops here stocking the Marshall books, but it's nothing like getting into Waterstones or any of the big chains of indies or whatever. So yeah, I'm flexible and open to any of any offers that come my way, but I do love the absolute control of being an indie author.
I feel like I've been reading your books for quite a while. I was talking about this chat coming up with my dad because he's a big fan of the first series that you wrote, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, "Oh, I really like his books." When I said you were
That's
coming.
lovely to hear.
Um, what's made you? You've got 4 different series. What's made you like sort of spread out across so many different
Um,
ones?
it's funny. I don't know. I think like there's a sort of was I don't know why I did it initially. I just sort of started with those Cullen books, and I wrote, I think, 4 or 5 of them, and then I thought, why don't I write one set in Dundee and see how that does? And with a different detective, and there was no sort of Machiavellian design to it. It was just like I had this idea, let's try it. And I did that, and then I thought also, oh, why don't I do a book set in London where I was working at the time? And they did the Fenchurch ones did really, really well, um, it sort of like just sort of then had a few things to juggle over the time. And it was always a bit of a challenge fitting the right books in at various points. But then um, one of the things that's actually quite important is knowing when to stop. And unfortunately, that's more of a commercial decision than a creative one. Or something, I think with so I've done 10 of the Fenchurch books, and they've done pretty well. commercially, but I felt so. I felt I'd done it. I said everything I could with the character, and every time I was coming around to writing another book in that series, I didn't feel a sort of what sense of positivity about it. And I think I put the guy through so much over those books, and like so that I thought I had 3 or 4 series. I merged a couple of them in to the Police Scotland ones. That was the Cullen books and the Craig Hunter books as well, and they're sort of like got a nice bow on them. So it feels like they're all in a sort of a nice closed off end space. So my focus now is 100% on the Marshall books, which was like it was the first. I think weirdly enough, it was the first new series I'd written in 7 years. So it's like the chance to
Wow.
just start again with, um, like all the things I'd learned in the 12, 13 years I've been publishing. See, like if I can come up with a sort of a new character that, and one of the things, one of the things is always writing stuff into corners, not necessarily in the book because I outline them, but like at the end of a book, I've got them in a certain place, and I have to pick up the next book, and oh god, I don't want them to be in that place. I have to spend a bit of time unpicking that. So with the Marshall ones, it's more of a chance to sort of what's the word, holistically plan out the series so that I knew, like over let's say 3 or 4 books, I know where Rob's going to go, and all the sort of supporting characters in there. They've all got sort of arcs, and I treat it so that each of the other characters they could be the star of their own series, really. But I've just got them as sort of supporting characters, and whereas I think the Fenchurch and Cullen books, they were very much that single point of view. So it's quite hard when you spend 80 to 100,000 words inside someone's head. It's like it's tough. Whereas with the Marshall books, I can pop into say Elliot or Rakesh's head instead and get like a different slant on the story and the world, and it sort of it keeps things fresh, and hopefully it keeps things fresh for the readers and stuff. So there's not really a design as to why I've done so many series. I'm not, but I'm obviously not that sort of monomaniacal. um, but I think that's probably the problem of being an indie publisher is that you don't have anyone to sort of guide you or tell you you shouldn't be doing this. You just do what you do, and I've learned a lot of learned from a lot of mistakes, and I think that's one of the best things about it is just really trying stuff out and seeing what works, what I enjoy, and what the readers enjoy as well.
So you've got some hellos from Sarah, Sam, and Leslie.
Oh, yeah.
While you're being sort of like you were sort of saying about writing at your own pace, how many books can you write then in a year?
Um,
Do you put out more
I
than
think like
one a year?
4 or 5 usually, sometimes 6, but sometimes 3. Um, this year, I've published fewer this year because I've got one that's stockpiled for something else, which has like slowed me down a bit. But then I did a sort of shorter thing that's coming out on Saturday, so it'll be 3 books out this year. Yeah. So I have produced a lot more, and I think one of the things with being the indie side is you do have that pressure to crank the handle, like you feel like a little hamster on the wheel, constantly running to keep the feeding the Amazon algorithm. And I guess part of it is um, it's more like it's treating the books more like a TV series as well. You don't have to wait. If you think a book's like an episode or 2 or 3 episodes, you don't have to wait a whole year to the next one. You just have to wait 3 or 4 months, and that's more refreshing. I think that's a lot of people who do operate in this space, like J.D. Kirk or L.J. Ross or Rachel McLean, to name but 3. They publish on that sort of cadence, and I think the readers love that. I think there's something really good about that. And it's also like creatively pretty good to be able to just finish a book in July and it's out in September. There's obviously like editing and audiobook narrating and all this stuff going in there. So you're treating it like a traditional publishing house would, so that it's got the same like quality checks. So if someone read one of my books or something by say Penguin or Orion, I hope they don't notice much quality difference, but they notice that I can publish 3 or 4 books a year in a series myself, so they don't have to wait too long until the next one, for like a year. Yeah.
but they are really good quality.
Oh, thank you.
Although I don't trust me on this because I wouldn't pick up any errors anyway. I'm like completely oblivious to like any kind of grammar errors. So that was a compliment in the story quality is excellent, but I couldn't. You could write the worst possible grammar in a book, and I would just be not noticing.
Oh, I have done. That's why I pay editors. It's quite interesting the stuff they come back with, and I keep making similar mistakes. But over time, you learn, and then you can sort of stop making the same mistakes. I think it's like when you're doing exams. When you're doing like the past papers beforehand. That's kind of what it's like. Is the more of those previous exams, the more times you're edited, the better you should get at getting a sort of cleaner book first time. But it's never perfectly clean or anything. There's always mistakes, and there's always stuff that the audiobook narrator now picks up as well, because he's reading it aloud and has to say the wrong words. Yeah.
What's coming out on Saturday then? This is exciting.
Yeah, I don't have a copy of it just now actually, because I don't know why I've not ordered them. It's a book called False Dawn, which is so this is the sixth Rob Marshall book, his Path of Darkness. And for those who've read it, it ends with the character DS Rakesh Sayal in a bit of a sticky situation, in that he's moved back to uniform, which he's never been in. In fact, he's not back there. He's going there for the first time because he's a direct entry, which doesn't actually happen in Police Scotland, as I've learned. But because he was a direct entry, he hasn't sort of spent his time walking the beat. So this is him walking the beat. So it's like so I know a few serving police officers, and it's interesting to sort of the chats they have. A lot of it's not just about catching wrong-uns or whatever. It's about the shift patterns and all these weird things. And this is one of the sort of back shifts which can go on. I think the last one on a rotation starts about 5 o'clock and go until 3 in the morning, which is usually not what you'd expect earlier in the rotation. So it's one of those horrible times, and it's a Friday night. In fact, is it Friday? I can't even remember. It's so long ago since I wrote it. But it's a horrible shift, and it's coming out on Saturday, which is St Andrew's Day, and that's when the book's set. So there's lots of little. It's not just like sort of going and attending domestics and so on. There's like pub fights and fireworks and all kinds of stuff. So it's him in charge of a squad of uniformed cops doing stuff. But there's a sort of story that runs through it, and a thread that goes through it, and it's kind of different to the usual sort of murder mystery books, and it's more sort of character driven and reflective. So people who watch stuff like Happy Valley or The Responder, those TV shows they've got cops in them, but they're not like there's been a murder on page on the first at the start. It's like there's a sort of a community stuff going on through it. So it's kind of that's the sort of the approach with that one more. And it was written as a little experiment because I wanted to write screenplays, and I've never done that. So I wrote that one as a screenplay first, and then converted it into a book. And it was actually quite an easy process, much easier. And rather than the sort of the lengthy, detailed outlines I did a much sketchier outline, and then used the screenplay to form up the story. And I'd got that edited with a few passes with my main editor, James Mackay. And we worked it back and forth until it was in a really good shape, and then just turned it into the novel, and then fleshed it out in terms of making all the text sing a bit more. And it was actually doing it that way was so much easier. But I'd misread one of his editorial notes, and there's a huge edit I had to make that I wouldn't have had to do had I not misread it. So. But otherwise, it was really quite good fun to do it that way, and it's a different thing to what I've written before. But it's still similar. It's all lots of cops being nasty to each other, which people like.
What's the title of it?
It's called False Dawn. So I did a previous sort of the prequel to this. In fact, it's on the bookshelf over there. I should have brought it over. Called False Start, which was because it's not got Marshall in it. It was about Rakesh's first day in the job. So it introduced a team an idea was that if anyone bought the book and anyone buys that, if you sign up to the mailing list, you get a free ebook of False Start. It's not a full length novel, but it's still quite chunky and substantial story about. I think that was about. There's a fictional caravan park in the borders where a load of Glaswegian criminals were hiding out, and they got into a fight and accidentally set fire to one of them, and both of them died and killed a cop in the process. But one of them escaped, I think. So it's about hunting them down. That was the whole sort of premise for the story. So there's a bit different. So given that's called False Start, but False Dawn works as a story idea there as a sequel. But yeah, there's shorter books. They're quite a lot snappier, but yeah, it's good fun to write something at different lengths. To sort of slog away so much. You can produce something quite satisfying over a shorter period or shorter length of words.
There's quite a lot of references to He-Man in his Path of Darkness.
Yeah, I was a massive fan of He-Man. It's so good. Yes, there's also, I think one of the things is people refer to Ibrox, where Rangers play, as Castle Grayskull, and I could never work it out whether they meant that as a compliment or not, because Castle Grayskull is where He-Man lived, not Prince Adam. And we did all that. I have the power, holding up the sword. When Prince Adam got his power to turn to He-Man, he got it from Castle Grayskull, if I remember. I think my brother had a Castle Grayskull set, but I think people associate it with Skeletor, the baddie. So I think there's a bit of confusion in the branding of He-Man. So if I put that sort of nonsense in the book.
It was fun. I've got a best friend who loves Skeletor. He's making his own
Yeah.
Snake Island.
Oh man, that's good. And I think my Christmas jumper this year is going to be a Thundercats one, which is probably the only thing that's secondary to He-Man.
Oh, no, I don't know. I think I'd put Thundercats over He-Man.
I couldn't find a He-Man one.
No, I'm sure there probably are then.
Yeah, well, Facebook or Instagram haven't put an advert up.
Facebook or Instagram hasn't read your book then. Doesn't know
I
that.
know they need to get in there. Yeah.
Get on with it, don't they? I started at book 6 though,
Okay.
with the series, which I think was maybe a mistake. Like, you could read it as a standalone, but I feel like I probably would have known who everyone
Yeah,
was if I'd
I
have
mean,
started at the beginning.
yeah, I think I tried to make each book standalone, but I failed. And there's like a thread running through, especially the first three books, and then the fourth, fifth, and sixth. There's a sort of thread, and yeah, I just can't do the low continuity Jack Reacher kind of thing. I have to do sort of very heavy. You really had to start at one. But that said, there's a bookshop called Whitey's in Peebles who are stocking it because the book's set. You can see on the cover the tunnel, and that's Needpath Tunnel, which is known locally as Half Mile Tunnel. So the bookshop in Peebles has been selling a ton of the books because it's like, people are they like to read about a town, even if it is vicious murders in that tunnel that everyone's scared enough to go through. Um, so yeah, there's people that just pick up book six, and similarly, the bookshop in Stow, which is just up the road from me, the third book, Lonely Place of Dying, which is named after a Batman story. They start reading there, and then people go back and read the first ones. But I think it's interesting to see how people feel, because obviously I've spent time developing those characters, and they're at a point now I've like built them from the start. But if you're getting in there and that's your sort of first exposure to the book, it'd be really interesting to see how different that would be if someone who's been there since the start of them, though.
I think someone who's been there from the start would probably get more of the nuances. Like, there's
Yeah.
moments when they're together as a family and things where I feel like I was missing something by starting at book 6. But
Yeah.
that was my fault, not yours.
That's my fault. Because I think that it's beholden to the author, I think, to make it read like, make not make it feel like that could be the start. I think that, if I remember rightly, I think Stuart McBride with Cold Granite, which is the first Logan McRae book, he intended that to read like it was the middle of a series. There wasn't like the start. There was a huge backstory, and you felt like there was like at least one book that you could have read before that. But I think there's something about authors being, you should be sort of making sure that people who are just, I don't know, stumbling across a paperback in Tenerife or something in a book exchange thing, that you've got, you get as much out of it, or you get a lot out of it. So certainly, as someone who's read all 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books in the series, yeah,
You still get a lot out of it. It's still an interesting
yeah.
story. Um,
Mhm.
I like the little references to kind of local custom, like there was like it's a Beltane that you
Belting, yeah, yes. So it was like, I mean, each of the books I've done, I try to set them rooted in one of the borders towns. Nobody really writes about down here, and it's not like the most populated area in Britain, shall we say. The sort of biggest two towns, the biggest town's Hawick, and then Galashiels, but they're only like about 10, 15,000 people there. I think if you combine them all up, it would be the size of somewhere like Inverness or Dundee. But it's quite, it's just a load of wee towns. So I tried to set each book in around one. So the sixth book is set around Peebles, which like you say has Beltane, which was, it's a sort of an old pagan fire festival in Edinburgh that we used to go as students, and that was in May. And they sort of over time merged that with the common riding. So it used to be, because these were borders towns at the sort of the southern tip of Scotland, and then there was like just nothing, and then a bit in England. And they would send off all the laddies to fight the English. And they sort of celebrated all that for hundreds and hundreds of years now. It's become a big tradition, and each one has their own distinct one, and People's has its own, which is merged with a pagan fire festival, just because that's what happened. Just like over time, these things evolved, and the Victorians do stuff. Jedburgh's got, I think, was it Selkirk or Jedburgh? Um, it was theirs one is built on, I think it's Selkirk. It's based on, um, I think it was about 10 or 20 young men went off to fight, and only one came back, and that's the sort of it's all their sort of celebrations based on that sort of thing about the sort of the soul returner. So um, there's a lot of history in each of these wee towns, and they're all distinct and all have their own little character. You could drive through them all in a day, and you wouldn't notice too much. But it's when you dig down between the cracks and stuff, you sort of start to appreciate it. And the guy, George Blair, who's the chairman of the Belcombe Committee, he was sort of gracious enough to give me a lot of his time and sort of just taking me through the sort of the structure of it, how it works. So all the sort of stuff that's in there, that's all sort of accurate, and it's a chance to document as well, much as anything. This is what the town does, and obviously, as I was outlining the book, it was like that bit was like, it was just sort of like about 3 or 4 chapters. And as I sort of chatting to George, it's like, God, there's so much I could cover here. And it sort of really let me sort of thicken and develop the sort of tension. And the sort of thing with small towns is everybody, Abdi kens Abdi, or everybody knows everyone in them. So that, there's all these like little sort of secrets that have been shared amongst the very few people, and animosities that go over time, and being able to sort of explore those in great detail, as well as capture the sort of the traditions of the town, and give and the distinctiveness that People's has, as opposed to the other towns which have got their own distinct traditions as well, and they all like engage with each other as well. So someone who's in the sort of high up in the Peebles Beltane, the God, I can't remember the terms now. The Beltane Queen is like a primary school age girl, and the lad and the lass, they're the sort of ones who they get it for a year, but then they have to celebrate it they have to sort of stay in the committee for another couple of years to sort of pass that down. But when you're in that year, you go to the other common ridings, so they're not all at the same time. So all the various different weekends, and you represent in your town basically, and that gives it another chance to for a bit of authorial malarkey and what they could get up to in that time. Yeah. Mhm.
Do the other books have other kind of similar traditions in?
No, that's the first one I really covered that sort of stuff, but each of them I try to like capture something about that town. So um like Stow is like it's a tiny wee place, so maybe like 200 houses or something, but it's got on the new Borders Railway that they reopened from Edinburgh. It's on that, and so it started to sort of get a bit more uh, of a development and so on. But between that and Lauder, there's this big, huge expanse, where you have to. It's a sort of main road, but it's like it's also not because you go over a cattle grid, and then there's all these sheep on the road and stuff. And in the winter down here, it gets really, really cold and snowing. So that made me give me like inspiration for that. So that sort of just that feature, that's kind of distinct between those two towns, that leads to sort of something, and then you've got the two towns at either end, and the body's found in one bit, and there's also like a rural farming stuff around it, but not in terms of the actual the sort of traditions of the town, but certainly some of the characters and some of the stories you hear from people. And the one I'm sort of working on, the seventh and eighth ones. The seventh is set in Hawick, which is one of the probably the furthest south of the Borders towns, and the biggest. And that's got a very distinct thing. It's been sort of like kind of they always say it's been cut off a bit more. It's got quite a unique language to it. Um, and if you hear someone from the board was speaking, and they've got a distinct accent from sort of other Lowland Scots places, but Hawick's got an even odder one, and it's a bit more Cumbric in there. So it's kind of that sort of stuff's quite fascinating, and it's come from the geography and the recent history. Like when they closed all the railways, these towns were getting cut off, and now they're sort of reopening them. They're getting more connected to Edinburgh, and there's talk of extending further down to Carlisle, which I cover a bit in that book. And hopefully that'll happen. It'll help places like Hawick regenerate and redevelop. They've got a big connection to two big cities, and you get a lot more tourism that way. And then so but it's being able to capture the distinct character of the town in there. With that one, another one is actually it's like a feature, Scots View, which is like a beautiful viewpoint across the Eildon Hills, and that's between St Boswell's and Earlston. So featuring those two towns, and they're very, very distinct. So Boswell's I was there today. It's got a really fancy bookshop called Main Street Trading Company, which is one best bookseller of the year and stuff. And it's really good, and Earlston's just won best chip shop of the year. So like the distinction between the two is quite distinct. So I like to capture the character of the towns, and it's easy, it's harder to do with the Borders because it's not like say with Ian Rankin doing Edinburgh, where Edinburgh's like a huge city, 300, 400,000 people. These are like tiny wee towns, and trying to sort of pull out something distinct, and also have lots of interesting murders and cops hating each other in there.
You're obviously doing it quite well, though. Did you deliberately choose to set it in the Borders because it's not very well explored in kind of fiction?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because around it's sort of I made the decision during lockdown because I'd written some books that during that time, and one of them was based in New York, just so that half in Edinburgh and half in New York, and obviously couldn't travel to New York. And before that, I'd written books set in Seattle and had to do a big travel thing over there to visit that area, and that was fascinating. But then I thought, why don't I just write something set here? It's easier to travel. I can just like go. So in the book you've read, there's a bit down in Ettrick, which is really far out. It's really remote, but you're actually quite close to big-ish towns, but you feel like you're thousands of miles from civilization when you're down there. But I can just go down there in 40 minutes and I'm there. And it's really good to just sort of like be able to go and soak up that sort of the landscape. And where being in the location really gives you ideas and stuff. So I'd put something about a shepherd's hut on the outline, and then as I was driving along the road, there was like a tree, and then there was like a little sort of sheep bit there. I was like, well, that's it. I just made one up, but I don't have to make one up. There's that one there. So I just went into the field, messed about, avoiding the rams, trying to headbutt me and stuff, and took some photos, and just got right. Yeah, this is where I could have the devil reincarnated.
I think I've heard of Ettrick. I think Myra Duffy's got a book set in Ettrick Bay or something.
Oh, Ettrick Bay's
It's like
on
a different place.
Butte. Yeah, yeah. It's just named. Yeah, obviously it's an old. Must be some old Scots or um, even older name. But yeah, Ettrick Bay is beautiful. It's on sort of the west side of Butte, so you look right across to Arran in the distance. It's fantastic. If you ever go to the Butte Noir Festival, I recommend. It's actually quite walkable from Rothsay. It's like about 2 miles. Just it feels like a long way, but I go to the Butte Noir Festival that Craig Robertson and co run every year, and it's a fascinating place. It's really pretty, and it's really easy to get to from pretty much anywhere in the UK, surprisingly enough, considering it's a Scottish island. But yeah, no, Ettrick and Ettrick and Bay are quite far apart.
The two different places. Sorry, my lousy
No, no,
geography.
no.
I'd love to go to Butte Noir, but I think I'm always at work when it's on.
Oh. Mhm.
Bit like the same with Bloody Scotland, because we start midweek as well.
Yeah, well, that's it. Like usually, like for Harrogate starts on a Thursday, and that's the best night, and Friday's like a big day. But yeah, Bloody Scotland's actually they do a lot more on a Sunday at Bloody Scotland than other festivals. So usually used to have the 5 o'clock slot on a Sunday was like one of the big ones. I remember like Irvine Welsh doing that and stuff. So yeah, but I know it must be quite frustrating if you can't get off the time off work at that time of year, especially as they're usually in the summer, which is like peak holiday season, so everyone wants to be off, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Harrogate's all right for me because that's like not far away, so I generally do like a weekend day at Harrogate.
Yeah.
It's like about an hour from where I live, so it's not.
Um, it's such a good festival, though. It's so much fun every year.
How do you find going and attending festivals and things as a more independent author? Do you still?
Yeah, well, it's more of a social thing. Like so, it's harder to get asked to be at them because I think a lot of festivals it's very much driven by publishers with publicists, so pitching several of their authors, and then I think there's probably quite a lot of authors get pushed for each slot at a festival. So I tend to go as more of a social thing, especially Harrogate. But to credit what they're due, like festivals like Butte Noir and also Bloody Scotland and Capital Crime have asked me to appear as an author, so they are starting to change. And I think the problem is there's so many indie authors out there, but it's like we're not. There are people there's people who sell a ton more than me who are like so JD Kirk and LG Ross, for instance, who are selling massive amounts of books, and they've got huge followings and should be at the big book festivals. The big book festivals should be asking them to be there. And I think there's maybe a bit of don't know, snobbery against us indie authors that we're not, we're just like chancers or whatever. But we sell hundreds of thousands of books a year. It's like we are significant players in the publishing industry, but we're somehow excluded from it. But I think it has changed a lot, certainly in the last 10 years. That there's so many more of the festivals, and there's also festivals that are more geared towards indie authors as well. It's harder for them because they're geared around usually print books, and it's a lot of the books like these are print on demand, so they're not thousands of copies printed at one go. It's one or two at a time. So the sort of terms for the bookshops are worse. So there's a certain element of that, I suspect. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to balance, isn't it?
Mm.
We put one on in Leeds every year, and we have an independent bookshop that does books for us. But if it's someone's really indie, we often ask them to bring their own.
Yeah.
if the
I mean,
bookshop can't sell them. But the bookshop are really
yeah,
good at communicating with us, so if they can get them, they will get them, and if they can't get them,
yeah. Yeah, I think it's like it's flexibility and stuff, and I know it's difficult to get hold of them. But if you're, if for instance, if they haven't been able to sell the books, then I'm happy to take the stock back because I know I can sell them to local bookshops, so they'll be asking for it. But yeah, it is a difficult one, and I totally understand the business decisions behind it and so on. But yeah,
it's a tricky one, isn't it?
yeah.
But do you have so for His Path of Darkness? When did that come out? Because I
Uh,
read that as your most recent book.
yeah, that was the 30th of September. Yeah. And this is when I think I was saying earlier about owning your mistakes and stuff. I did make a bit of a mistake with that one. So um, I forgot to upload the file, and you have it on pre-order. It was on pre-order for a few months, and I forgot to upload the file. You get emails from Amazon saying, "Remember to upload your file," and it's always like, "Yeah, I've done that. I've uploaded it." And they went, "You've cancelled your pre-orders because you haven't uploaded the file." So I had to sort of hurriedly fix that, and they were actually really good, and they sort of emailed everyone who'd pre-ordered it saying the book is actually available. It's over here rather than the one that you bought. So that was stressful, a bit stressful, but you know you live and learn, and you don't make that mistake again. I hope. Yeah,
That sounds like the kind of thing I could do.
it's easy done. It's very easy done. It just, especially if you're juggling too many things, like I always seem to do.
So that's 2 months between the last one and this one. That's quite.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is like about half the length of that, so it was easier to do. But then I haven't started writing the next one, so it's probably going to be February, March before that. So in fact, it'll be March because I haven't started the actual. I've outlined two books; they'll be coming quite quickly together. But yeah, it seems to be running at about 6 months every book now, which is less frequent than I'd like, but it doesn't seem to actually do any harm commercially, and it actually lets people catch up, which is maybe not a bad thing.
No, probably not. You were talking before about having a few active police people that you can
Mm.
draw on for help. When you made the swap from writing them kind of this side of the border in England to Scotland, was that a big change? Because there is quite a difference, isn't there, in
Yeah, I mean, generally the principles are the same. Um, so like it's all about it's the same chain of custody with evidence and so on, and all the problem is all the names are different. So like we don't call burglary up here; it's housebreaking and all these kinds of things. And Scots law tends to have you need to have two parties involved in every time you're speaking to someone, and for instance, two pathologists and so on. But it's quite easy to sort of establish the differences. And I tend to be more focused on the police rather than the procedure as well. So I want the characters to come across rather than it to be sort of a forensic blow by blow account of a murder investigation, and the sort of exploring the victims' lives and the villains' motivations and who they are and why they're doing these things is always much more interesting to me. But the thing with writing the set in, say, London, it's because it's like such a colossal city. Um, with so much money and power and also so much poverty and deprivation there as well, you can write very different stories than you can set in the Scottish borders, which you can't really do. Books set about financial crime there, for instance. So yeah, it's good to have a bit of variety. And there's a book I'm working on which has got more back in that world, and it's made me remember a lot of the peculiarities of the English system versus the Scottish system, shall we say.
you potentially could do some kind of financial crime thing, but it might have to be in like a big farm or like
Yeah,
like money laundering through like a
someone mining Bitcoin in an old disused mine somewhere.
yeah, something random like that. It would be more inventive, I would imagine, but it probably happens
Yeah.
because it will happen where people least expect it.
Oh God, yeah. So much stuff happens. I think.
What do you think draws people? Because Scottish crime is still like a huge thing, right? That's why you've got those amazing festivals like Butte Noir and
Hmm.
Bloody Scotland. We're a big fan here of the McIlvenny and Debut
Yeah.
Prize every year. What do you think is bringing people back time and time again to kind of Scottish crime fiction?
I think the thing with Scottish crime fiction is we're dour people, but also very sarcastically funny people. So we've got that sort of perfect mix of darkness and light, which I think makes the best crime fiction. You don't want it to all be sort of relentlessly bleak, or relentlessly twee. So I think we've got this sort of in our national psyche, we've got that sort of thing where there's a sort of a sort of duality to the character that makes it, I think, flow through everyone. And I think that's an interesting element of Scottish crime fiction. And I think there's also scope for, like writing about, I think um, England's quite, for instance, is quite largely, homogenous to a few areas, so like the north and the south are just like, if you go, when you go sort of south of, I don't know, York or something, it gets very flat and there's not much difference there. And the north, there's a bit more rugged hills and stuff. But Scotland, like if you can go from like Edinburgh to the borders, to the sea, to the seaside, and up to the Highlands, and they're all very sort of, and through to Glasgow. They're all very different places that offer very different opportunities, and all the various islands as well. And also, you can pop over to the border and explore the north of England as well. Um, and I think there's a geographical range that I think is quite fascinating to write about, and um, you you're never really sort of stuck feeling you're repeating yourself. I think when you write about Scotland, whereas I find with London, I was feeling like it's kind of it's London, 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 and it's like it's a fascinating city, it's an amazing place, and I love it. But I felt more writing about Scotland is a bit more or a bit more variety to it. Or that's the way I find it anyway.
Do you think that's also because it's like a place you know better, maybe? Or
Hmm, that's possible, and because I mean I grew up in up here and grew up, and went to university in Edinburgh and worked in Edinburgh, and then I worked in London for a bit, and I'm back here. So yeah, I think I know it a lot more. And also, as you get older and maybe allegedly wiser, you sort of start to sort of appreciate different things about the the locations and stuff that you live in, and places you visit and experience. And I think I do know, like there's a sort of when you grow up in Scotland, there's a shorthand for everything, and there's also big differences east and west, especially in north. And you you sort of appreciate the sort of the shorthand you have for it, and you just like there's things that you can't that are characterized in Scotland that you sort of just automatically know when you grow up here, and it's so you just get it by osmosis.
do you, so you said you went to university in Edinburgh?
Yeah.
The sorry, I got distracted. It's easy then.
That's right.
Um, tell us what you have read, because I like to ask this question. Tell us what you've read recently that you've really enjoyed.
um,
I mean, we're
one
at
book I
nearly the
read
end of the
recently.
year, so we can even go book of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, I'd say the book that came out, I did actually read it last year, but it came out this year, and that's Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville, which is just an absolutely incredible novel, and it was really sort of fresh. So it's like a cross between a Thomas Harris and a Stephen King novel, um, and it's got this real pacey, investigative side to it, and also a real heart wrenching side to it as well. With don't want to use the V word, but there are vampires in it. He doesn't use that, but it's a vampire book unlike any other. It's so good. It's like a crazy FBI thriller and a vampire book in the same. But it's like there's so many layers to it. And everyone I've talked to who've read it just raves about it. So if you haven't read it, at least check it out and see if you like the sample. But It's what it was an absolutely astonishing book. I can't wait to read the sequel to it.
I haven't read it yet, but I've heard good things.
Yeah.
Needs to be on the list
Definitely
to
get a
check
hold of
out.
it.
Yeah, because Chris Brookmeyer, trying to think of who else that I've interviewed recently that mentioned it. But it's come up quite a lot when I've asked people what they've read and enjoyed.
Yeah. Oh, it's like it's staggering, and it's like it's inventive and original, but it's also it's familiar, and it's just such a page turner. It's set in America, so if you don't like American books, then it maybe not for you. But I think anyone who read it should enjoy it. Would be my take on it.
Do you get any other recommendations or?
Um, Let me think. Um, there was something I read recently that I really enjoyed, and I'm reading them back to back, Rebus novels, because I discovered I hadn't read many of the last 6 or 7 of them. So I'm about 4 or 5 into my little run. So I think I've got 3 more to read after that. And it's that I think, as cheap cliched as it is, you just it's there's no slack in quality as Ian went on through the series, and they're just still as page turning and gripping as ever. And it's really so any of the Rebus books, if you haven't, I mean, everyone should have read them most in the group, but if you haven't, obviously just pick it up. And also, if you drifted off earlier or you stopped at exit music, definitely pick up Standing in Another Man's Grave and read on from there, because the books after he left the police are just as good. So yeah, that's like an unknown author, Sir Ian Rankin. You heard it here first.
It's really hard, isn't it, when you're asked like that question at short notice?
Yeah. It'll come to me, but there was something else I read just before that I really, really enjoyed as well. Damn,
At least you've stayed
it'll
at
come
true
to
to
me.
Scotland and given us Scottish author recommendations.
Yeah.
You win points for that.
Yes. So I mean, Northern Ireland and Scotland aren't too dissimilar. So Stuart's book as well. There's like a kinship across the Irish Sea, I think, there as well.
Yeah, there is quite sometimes, isn't there, a bit of a tie across them. Um, what? So I'm curious because you said about your books being on audio earlier. Do you have someone who reads them, or do you read them yourself? Because I know some authors do
No,
the illustration.
yeah, no, nobody wants to hear my voice. It's terrible. Um, no, there's a guy I worked with on a book called, his name is Angus King, and he does like so J.D. Kirk, Neil Lancaster, quite a few others. And I got him to do a one book, and it was like, all right, I've realised how good he is at doing it, but also he's got a massive fan base. So it's like, I think there's a match in the material. So yeah, so he's working his way through my backlist now. He's done all the Marshall books, but he's also done the Fenchurch and Dodds ones. We're a bit worried about um, the Fenchurch ones because they're set in London and we're featuring a London detective, whether it's worked, but they've not had any comments at all that I've seen on the reviews saying why on earth is a Scotchman reading a London book. But he lived down there as well, so he's really good at sort of capturing the accents and so on. So that's not been an issue at all. But it's just like it's brilliant working with him. He's a really good guy, and also really positive, really flexible, really quick as well. So we're working through the Police Scotland ones next. So they'll start coming out in new editions from next summer. So there were like 3 that were with a previous publisher, but they're expiring soon. So Angus is going to redo them. So it'd be all of my like 40 or 45 books or whatever will be narrated by his dulcet tones in the not too dissimilar future. But there's not too distant future, but there's about oh god, I think 21, no, 22, 23 actually of my books. 24. 24 he's narrated, and there's another 14 to come. That's a lot more books than I thought I'd done.
That's amazing. Yeah, that really does show like your rate of knots that you go at. 'Cause that's quite a
Yeah,
lot.
when you accrue it over time, yeah. And that's not including the rubbish ones that I wrote that were unpublished.
Would you be tempted to go a bit Stuart Neville-like and explore kind of a bit of another genre? I guess Stuart's is still
I
crimey, but
did, yeah, yeah, I did a really terrible vampire book years ago, and it didn't do well at all. And I think it's because when people see Ed James, I think I'd published 4 books at that point. When they see that name, they expect a Scottish police procedural, not a vampire book set in the Highlands. So that's probably why it didn't do so well. And I basically just took the vampires out, and it's now called Lost Cause. So that's the first one Angus narrated, to segue between the two. Um, I've written sci-fi books but nothing. I've written two whole ones that are just sitting clogging up my hard drive. I think the thing is like it's what the fear I have is that you have to sort of make another author name. So I've established Ed James and people know me and know what I write. But if I was writing sort of space opera or whatever, I'd need to have a different name, and people would then I'd have to sort of get the marketing and stuff from scratch. So that feels like a lot of hard work. So I'll just write more books about cops.
unless you did any Ian Banks thing and just put like an initial in.
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't have his talent though, sadly. I loved every single one of his books. He's one of sort of my biggest heroes, along with Irvine Welsh and Ian Rankin, the biggest inspirations, I guess. Um, and yeah, he could write the hell out of a Scottish small town um, novel and also out of a space opera. I don't know how he could do both, but he did, and he was incredible, incredible talent. Yeah.
So do you also like to read sci-fi if you've had a go
I
at
tend to
writing
read
it?
more sci-fi than crime, definitely. I find I went through a big phase of just not being able to read crime at all. It felt like I was editing what I was reading, and that's like because I'd spent so much time editing my own stuff, and it was really difficult. I've managed to get back into that, and do love reading a good crime novel. But yeah, I think the thing with sci-fi is it's like for something like. Um, what's it called? There's Andy Weir who did The Martian. His most recent book, anyway. Uh, God, Project Artemis, or
Project
the one
Hail
set in the moon. Yeah, Project Hail Mary. That's it. Which is just incredible. There's just so much invention in there. It's like I don't know how you could come up with the idea in the first place, or and then hope to execute on it, but to execute on it that well is incredible. It's just like so much in there. And Adrian Tchaikovsky, as well as the Children of Time series, just like I can't fathom how you would even begin to write that stuff, let alone or conceive it, let alone write it. These are like really gifted guys or gals writing all this stuff. Like the Murderbot books as well. I can't remember the author's name, but she like writes incredible stuff. They're just really off the wall. And it's like I don't have that level of imagination, unfortunately. So I think I better keep my writing set on this planet and this time. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was going to ask you what your favourite sci-fi reads were, but you've already touched on some really good ones.
Yeah, and that, yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir, cracking book, and Adrian Tchaikovsky, Children of Time, and Ian Banks, culture novels, and is it Martha Wells who did the Murderbot books? Is that her name? I can't remember. The Murderbot books are really good as well. They're sort of short, punchy ones, really good.
I haven't
Yeah.
read those, but I will have a look because I love Adrian Tchaikovsky's
Mm,
books
mm,
and Andy Weir's.
yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of Jeff Vandermeer as well. He was in
Yeah.
Scotland
Yeah, really
recently.
good. Was he? Damn it.
Yeah,
Oh
he
yeah, I
kind
love
of
his books.
did
Yeah, really good.
interning in Edinburgh.
Oh god. Right, just up the road from me.
Well, I couldn't make the one they did Manchester and Edinburgh, and I couldn't make either, so I dispatched our
Oh
Scottish
no.
Edinburgh to the Edinburgh one. Get me a signed Jeff Vandermeer book. I was like, I need to have one in my possession. So,
Mhm.
She obliged because she's a delight.
Excellent. Oh, that's lovely.
How are you going to celebrate the release on Saturday
I'm
for your
actually going out with some old friends from home, so school friends. So just going out to back in Carnoustie. Just going out to get some food and drink with some old pals. Yeah, that's how I'm going to celebrate that way. Yeah, and maybe have a
Do you
little bit of
take,
haggis to celebrate St Andrew's Day.
you take them
Not
a
a
copy
whiskey
of
because
the
I don't
book?
like whiskey. I might do actually. Yeah.
Do you who kind of reads the books first in your family, or do you not let them read them?
I try not to let them read them before they come out, but both my dad and my uncle do read them. In fact, my uncle, when he read the first book, he said, "How does he know so much about police stations?" And it was because I'd made it up. There isn't a Leith Lock police station, but I'd invented one, and so it means I couldn't get it wrong. So he was that was a chuckling one. But yeah, I always get like nice comments from my dad and my uncle on books and various other people in the family. Yeah.
That's nice. It must be nice to be able to share what you've written like that. Do
Yeah,
you?
I think they're very quite proud of me as well, but I tried to shy away from that kind of stuff.
So, what are you working on next then? So, we've
It'll be
got.
the seventh Marshall book, which is called Fear of Any Kind. Uh, and so that's the one set in Hawick, and then I'm going to do them back to back with the eighth one, which is called Our Debts to the Past. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
How do you come up with the titles? Because they are good. How do you keep coming up
So
with fresh titles?
yeah, well, so like, The Turning of Our Bones is the title to an Arab Strap song, which is probably one of my favourite Scottish bands. And His Path of Darkness, it's actually the book's loosely based on um, Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg, um, which is 200 years old this year, I discovered. And that's a line from that. So what I do actually for these books is I look for sort of famous quotes from people set in who's based here or lived here or wrote books here, so like John Buchan, Walter Scott, and just like you can find a little phrase that does that, or just Nick Batman that title. Yeah, so like so they're just like finding a nice little intriguing phrase, his path of darkness, asking like questions like what's his path, why is it dark, so like you immediately get these questions asked rather than the man who died in a wheelbarrow or something like that. It's like it's less, it's a bit more opaque and a bit more making you think as a reader, I think. Yeah.
So, before I ask you to show off what you've written to remind people what they're going to go away and buy, would you make a graphic novel
Mhm.
of any of your books?
Oh yeah, I'm a massive like graphic novel reader. Just trying to think which ones would work. I think I would actually just rather write Batman rather than have a graphic novel made, um, because I don't. I think it's quite. I mean, like the comic medium is quite different from like film and also from literature in a way that like a radio play is different from a stage play or a screenplay. So if I was writing a graphic novel, I'd like to write something original for that medium. Um, but yeah, I love that stuff. Even just like even hardcore crime stuff like Ed Brubaker does that sort of stuff. I love all that. It doesn't have to be like men in lycra running around or flying around.
Well, there's a good history, isn't there, of like Scottish crime authors writing for graphic novels as well. So,
Yeah, yeah. Denise Mina and Ian Rankin both written Hellblazer. John Constantine. So yeah, I would do that actually. I do like a bit of Constantine. So um, that's more like sort of close to what we do, the sort of the dark, horrible noir stuff. And he's a really gritty character. Yeah.
yeah, I
Mhm.
know. My mister's a really big fan of John Constantine.
Yeah.
And I think particularly Denise Miner's run on it. think has some of his
Yeah,
favourites. But
yeah, oh, it's good. Yeah. So it's such a wide range of creators have worked on that. It's got like a sort of stuff from the dark, dark, dark to the light, light, light. It's quite fascinating series. Yeah.
yeah, you can't not pick up one of it that you would enjoy, really. Um, Remind people who are watching what they are going to go and buy. So either that's currently
Yeah.
out or
So
coming out on Saturday.
yeah, yeah. So if you haven't read any of the Rob Marshall books, The Turning of Our Bones is the way to start. If you have and want the latest one, it's that, his Path of Darkness. Obviously, it's mirrored. And if you give me a second, run over to my bookcase, and that is, if you go to my website, you sign up to the mailing list and you get that free in ebook, not in paperback, because that costs money. And the sequel to that is False Start. The sequel to that, False Dawn, which is also the sequel to that as well. So that's out on Saturday. Yeah.
Marvelous. I will get that pre-ordered for Saturday. And then
Oh, thank you. Hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure it sounds really good, to be fair. And I feel like I know the characters now. So,
Oh, good.
and then all that's left to say is thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great fun. Yeah. And yeah, hope people out there enjoy the books. We've got a lot out of that. And thanks again for all the great work you do on the group. It's really, really good. And a lot of authors really appreciate the stuff you guys do. So I want to thank you from all of us.
Oh, you're very welcome.